you and I are going to have a difficult conversation. However, I promise you that if we get through the difficult parts of this story, there's a better ending waiting for us on the other end. 4 years ago, I set out to reconcile the lynching of a man named Alonzo Tucker, the most widely documented African-American victim of lynching in Oregon. Alonzo Tucker was 28, married, and a boxer from California. He was lynched in Coos Bay, Oregon in 1902 after being wrongfully accused of sexually assaulting a white woman before he was eventually hung from a light pole on the old Marshfield Bridge in front of a crowd of 300. Even children were a part of the lynch mob that left Alonzo Tucker's body hanging there for several hours. Despite this all occurring in broad daylight without a masked man in the crowd, no one would ever be held accountable for his killing. Alonzo Tucker was just one of the thousands of African Americans who were lynched in this country. So, how do you reconcile a lynching? How do you reconcile historical injustice? Admittedly, 4 years ago, I was not the person who would answer such a question. In fact, I had spent most of my life actively avoiding all topics of race because I felt I didn't have the words or ability to contribute to these conversations. So when I first heard about the national movement to memorialize African American lynching victims, I figured to myself, who am I to really think that I could be of any help? I was too intimidated to want to get involved. But thankfully, a John Lewis quote inspired me to change my mind. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? This inspired me with the fierce urgency of now. By simply asking the question, how do you reconcile lynching, and being willing to search for an answer, I've learned that there are 3 R words within this idea of reconciliation: remembrance, repair, and redemption. And that in order for us to get to that last R word of redemption, we need to have the courage it takes to undertake the first 2. Because what I've also learned is that our failure to remember and repair our history is what allows injustices like lynching to continue on into today. Thus, it has become my life's mission to help other individuals and communities ask their own questions about reconciling historical harm. So in 2018, I first reached out to the community of Coos Bay to try and help me begin this process of reconciliation with a series of acts of remembrance. When I tell older African Americans from the Portland area that I'm traveling to Coos Bay or other regions of Southern Oregon, they without fail always ask me 2 questions. How many people am I going with? And am I prepared to defend myself? Because even in 2022, these questions are still on the forefront of their minds because of Oregon's history of fear and intimidation towards blacks. Southern Oregon was not the most likely place for this work to begin. In fact, 4 years ago, most people thought I was out of my mind for thinking I could put a historical marker about lynching in Coos Bay, Oregon. But what Coos Bay taught me is that no matter where you go, you can find enough people who are willing to choose justice if given the opportunity. It's just a matter of getting them to see where there's been injustice. That's not to say there wasn't a reasonable reluctance at first to want to remember something as painful as a lynching. But what Coos Bay was eventually able to see is that while we can't change the past, we can always change our relationship to the past, and that they had the power to write a new ending to Alonzo Tucker's story. In 2020, we held a soil collection ceremony near the spot of the lynching and collected 2 jars of soil, with each bit of soil representing part of Alonzo Tucker's story. One jar was sent back to a museum in Montgomery, Alabama, and the other jar is now on display at the Coos History Museum. In 2021, we unveiled a historical marker in the community to memorialize Alonzo Tucker and the thousands of other African Americans who were lynched in this country. The historical marker was more than just a retelling of history. It was also the making of history, as over 600 people, double that who were at the 1902 lynching, gathered at the unveiling ceremony to pay witness to Alonzo Tucker and add this new chapter to his story. So, as meaningful as these acts of remembrance were, the lynching of Alonzo Tucker has not yet been reconciled, because remembrance alone is not enough to get to redemption. We need repair. We need to put an end to the harm that lynching continues to cause today. In this case, we are called to repair the fundamental question of who our society believes deserves death, because the answer continues to be people that disproportionately look like me, like Alonzo Tucker. The value of our lives is tied up in this question. The value of all African Americans is tied up in this question. Our failure to remember and repair the legacy of lynching is what has allowed it to evolve. Lynching never ended. It simply moved indoors, where all-white juries and expedited trials carried out the same verdict as the lynch mob. Because at the same time lynchings in the United States were going down, state-sanctioned executions were going up. During the 1930s, 2/3 of all executions in the United States were of African Americans. Between 1910 to 1950, while only making up 22% of the South's population, African Americans accounted for 75% of all of those who were executed in this region, and this disproportionality continues to today, where African Americans make up 13% of the population, but 41% of those who are on death row. And when we consider the fact that of that 41%, nearly all are African American males, yet African American males only make up 6.5% of our population, we have to ask ourselves, how do we get from 6.5 to 41%? The color of your skin still plays a crucial role in whether our society believes you deserve death or not. We have been too busy asking ourselves the question, does this person deserve to die for their crimes, that we haven't first asked ourselves the question, do we deserve to kill? Because if the answer is no, then it doesn't matter what the answer is to that first question. Did you know Germany doesn't have the death penalty? Germany knows that given their history, it would be unconscionable for the country of Germany to systematically execute its citizens, especially if a disproportionate number of those citizens were Jewish. The world would be in outrage. We in the United States would be outraged if that were the case. Yet where is that same outrage when, given our history, the United States systematically executes its citizens and a disproportionate number of those citizens are African American? Where is the outrage when, given our history as a state? Where is the outrage when, given our history as a state, a disproportionate number of African Americans sit on Oregon's death row? Because I don't hear any outrage. 4 years ago, I set out to reconcile the lynching of Alonzo Tucker, and that is still my goal. I've just learned along the way that reconciliation requires more than remembrance, but I can't find this reconciliation on my own. We have a responsibility to the history that we inherit, and that history is calling for us to end the death penalty in Oregon. So, we need to be outraged over injustice. We need to address this moral question of our time. We need to get our friends, our family, and the wider community of Oregon to be inspired by the fierce urgency of now. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? We need remembrance and repair so that we can hopefully one day bring this story to a place of redemption. When I was younger, I used to think that it was remarkable people that did remarkable things. But the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that it's remarkable things that make remarkable people, and I believe that you can be a part of something that's remarkable. By using repair and Alonzo Tucker's story to end the death penalty in Oregon, we can bring his memory a semblance of redemptive justice, the kind of justice that redeems our pain, our wrongdoing, and our stories. People ask me if I really think this connection between lynching and the death penalty will change hearts and minds. Well, let me tell you, I know it does because it changed my mind. I wasn't always this person. I graduated high school with the dream of becoming a tough-on-crime prosecutor. I used to be a passionate supporter of the death penalty. I gave a speech my junior year of college in favor of capital punishment, and I'm not that old, so that wasn't that long ago. I've always cared about justice. But then I learned about lynching, and I learned about its connection to the death penalty, and I realized that there is no justice unless there's equal justice. Equal justice under law. That's what it says on the Supreme Court. But our system that we depend upon to dispense the most ultimate form of justice is too flawed to produce anything but injustice. I would say it's broken, but it's functioning exactly the way it was intended, as a replacement for lynching. I need redemption too. So, how do we reconcile lynching? We remember their stories, we repair the fundamental question, and we redeem their legacy. None of our stories are over. My story is not over, Coos Bay's story is not over, and most importantly, neither is Alonzo Tucker's. We all need redemptive justice. And Alonzo Tucker's story needs one more chapter, an end to lynching in Oregon. Because right now, when we talk about Alonzo Tucker, we talk about the legacy of lynching. Well, I need your help so that one day when we talk about lynching, we're talking about the legacy of Alonzo Tucker. Thank you.